Today, we are going to discuss the 8 worldly conditions, ashta, loka, Dhamma, in Theravada Buddhism. Lord Gautama Buddha attained enlightenment as a Samma Sambuddha 26 centuries ago, while he was meditating under a tree in a place called Bodh Gaya in India. Now, during the process of enlightenment, the Buddha realized the 4 noble truths with no assistance from any other teacher. The 4 noble truths that the Buddha realized are the truth of universal suffering, dukkha satya, the truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya satya, the truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha satya, and the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, magga satya. And in the first noble truth, the Buddha discovered that there is unavoidable, inevitable, and universal suffering, both physical suffering and mental suffering. The Buddha said, birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, grief, pain, and despair are suffering. Association with what one dislikes is suffering. Separation from what one likes is suffering. Not getting what one desires is suffering. And the Buddha said, in short, the 5 aggregates of clinging that we are made of is suffering. And the Buddha has also described certain other conditions that the human beings are bound to face universally during their life, which also can lead to suffering if they react to those experiences inappropriately through their ignorance. And in a discourse called the Patama Loka Dhamma Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya, which is a collection of the Buddha's numerical discourses, the Buddha described 8 such conditions, which are worldly conditions or vicissitudes. And they consist of 4 pairs: gain and loss, labha, alabha, fame and disgrace, yasa and ayasa, praise and blame, prasamsa and ninda, and pleasure and pain, sukha and dukkha. And the Buddha said in that discourse that this world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions, while the 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world. And the human beings have this natural disposition to avoid any unpleasant experiences and to have only pleasant experiences in their life, because they believe that only the pleasant experiences can bring lasting happiness to them. So they develop desire and craving for any pleasant experience while developing aversion and rejection for any unpleasant experience. And when human beings are preoccupied with this need to enjoy the pleasant experiences and to reject unpleasant experiences, they are prepared to do any unskillful, unwholesome actions in order to obtain the pleasant experiences or to reject unpleasant experiences. And those unskillful and unwholesome actions can result in suffering in this life as well as future lives. And they can also lead to one's continued existence in the cycle of birth and death, the samsara. And these unwholesome activities can also distance one from the Buddhist path of liberation. The first pair are gain and loss, labha, alabha. Now, whether one is a householder or a monastic, whether one is unenlightened or enlightened, one is bound to experience some form of gain and loss during one's life. And for the householders, they can gain or lose material possessions, gain or lose wealth, family members, friends, relatives, relationships, one's status, reputation, health, etc. And for monastics, monks and nuns, they may gain or lose the essential basic requisites such as robes, food, their lodgings, and medicines. The second pair of worldly conditions are fame and disgrace, yasa, ayasa. Ordinary human beings, through their ignorance, crave for fame and popularity. And it is because they believe that one's happiness and success depend only on their popularity among other people, such as their family members, friends, relations, colleagues, and others in the society. And if they receive any unpopularity or negative comments, they can't cope with it. And they consider that as a direct personal attack on their very integrity, indicating a failure in their success and worth. Now, during one's life, every human being is exposed to some form of unpopularity or negative comments. So it is not something that happens only to oneself. But this unpopularity and the negative comments, they are transient and they won't last permanently. Now, when one's fame and popularity develops and spreads, it is more likely for one to receive blame than previously. Because the natural tendency among the people is to blame people who are more popular and famous than those who are with no fame or popularity. The third pair of worldly conditions are praise and blame, prasansa and ninda. Ordinary people, again through ignorance, are keen to receive praise from others around them. And when they receive praise, they are delighted and they crave for even more praise. But if they hear any criticism, disapproval, or blame about themselves or their activities, they are unhappy and feel dejected because they wrongly believe that one's happiness, worth, and recognition in the world depends only on approval that one receives from other people. Now, there are some people, even if one's actions deserve to be criticized and disapproved, they are unable to receive them or correct themselves. And they are unaware that it is natural for every human being to receive both praise and blame sometime during their life. Now, the Buddha has said that there is no one in this world who is always praised or who is always blamed during one's lifetime. And when one looks at the Buddhist literature, one can see many instances. Even the Buddha himself was blamed and wrongly accused by many people. And Buddha managed all the criticisms with equanimity. The last pair of worldly conditions are pleasure and pain, sukha and dukkha. Again, ordinary human beings have the natural tendency to enjoy pleasant sensations and to reject and avoid any unpleasant sensations. And they are preoccupied with the need to have pleasant sensations from the external sense objects that they receive. That is, pleasant visual objects through the eye, pleasant sounds through the ear, pleasant smells through the nose, pleasant taste through the tongue, pleasant touch sensations through the body, and pleasant mental objects through the mind. And when they receive any pleasant sensations, they react with desire, delight, lust, and crave for even more pleasant sensual experiences. But if they receive any unpleasant sensual experiences, they will reject them with ill will and aversion. And again, it's due to this false belief that it is the pleasant experiences that brings happiness to oneself, and that unpleasant experiences bring unhappiness in life. Now we react to these 8 world conditions the way that we react because of our ignorance of the universal natural characteristics of all the experiences. The Buddha has said every experience is impermanent, anicca, unsatisfactory, dukkha, and lack any permanent substantiality, not self. And we suffer when we face the world conditions because of our wrong belief that our happiness and unhappiness are gained only through our external pleasant or unpleasant experiences. Now, Buddha never advocated that we should deny or avoid any pleasant experiences that we receive through our internal sense doors. But the Buddha's advice was to experience those pleasant experiences with equanimity and with no craving or attachment to them. In the Patama Loka Dhamma Sutta, the Buddha stated that all the 8 worldly conditions are impermanent, transient, and are subject to change. Now, when we suffer due to the 8 worldly conditions, they are not the problem. The problem is our reaction to them, because we crave for positive experiences and we develop aversion and rejection for negative experiences. When one develops and cultivates the Buddhist path of liberation, that is the Noble Eightfold Path, and as our wisdom matures, one will gradually react less and less to the 8 worldly conditions. And when one gains enlightenment as an arahant will be completely equanimous to any of the world conditions, whether they are positive or negative experiences. Now, during Buddhist meditation, if one is mindful to one's experience from moment to moment, one can keep a watch on positive and negative reactions that arises in the mind when one faces pleasant or unpleasant experiences. And then reflecting on the Buddha's teaching that all such experiences are impermanent, transient, and subject to change, the meditator can avoid reacting to them and cultivate the quality of equanimity. And when equanimity is cultivated well during meditation, then one should try to use it when one faces ups and downs in one's day-to-day life. Now, through the practice of equanimity, one aims to find happiness that is not dependent on enjoying gain, fame, praise, and pleasure, or avoiding negative experiences such as loss, disgrace, blame, and pain. In a discourse called Mahamangala Sutta of the Khuddaka Nikaya, that's a collection of the Buddha's minor discourses, the Buddha said, Uttasa loka dhammehi tam yasana kampati asokam virajam kemam etam mangala muttamam. The mind unshaken by worldly vicissitudes, sorrowless, stainless, and secure. This is a great blessing. Thank you very much.